The ranch was quiet in the way only a Texas afternoon can be, heavy, golden, and still enough that you could hear the grass bend under the dry June wind. The kind of quiet that settles into your bones if you've lived long enough to stop running from it. George Strait sat in the wide leather armchair near the window of his living room, the one that faced west toward the hill country, where the light always fell in long amber sheets this time of day. His boots were off. His hat was on the side table next to a half-finished glass of sweet tea and a paperback novel he hadn't touched in 3 days. The television was on low, not because he was watching it, but because the silence without it felt too complete. Too much like the years before the music, before the tours, before everything that came after. He was 72 years old. His hands still looked like a rancher's hands, wide, calloused, with prominent veins running from knuckle to wrist. He had spent the last 40 years being one of the most recognized faces in American country music. And yet, sitting there in the amber light of his San Antonio home, he looked exactly like what he had always been underneath all of it. A man from Pearsall, Texas, who had never quite figured out what to do with stillness. His daughter-in-law, Brooke Strait, had left a plate of sliced peaches on the kitchen counter before driving into town with the grandkids. His son Bubba was somewhere on the back property checking the fence line. George had told him twice that the fencing crew could handle it, and Bubba had smiled and grabbed his gloves anyway. The boy was 44 years old and still couldn't sit still on a property without checking something. George understood that more than he ever said out loud. The television murmured. He wasn't watching it. He was thinking about the new album, or trying not to think about it, which amounted to the same thing. His producer, Dale Whitfield, had called twice that week about returning to the studio in Nashville. George had said he would think about it. Dale knew what that meant. George always came back. He had been making records since 1981, and there had never been a year where the music didn't eventually pull him back like a tide. But this year felt different. Not bad, just different. Heavier, maybe. Like the air before a storm that doesn't announce itself. He reached for the sweet tea. On the television, a local San Antonio news anchor with sharp shoulders and a practiced expression was speaking over footage that George wasn't processing. Something about city council, a vote on road infrastructure. The usual architecture of civic concern that scrolled past him without friction. Then the footage changed, and George Strait put down his glass. The images on the screen were aerial shot from a news helicopter, wide, sweeping shots of what had once been a cluster of low-slung brick buildings surrounded by live oak trees and a chain-link fence with faded red lettering. Even from the air, even through the distortion of distance and the strange flattening effect of helicopter footage, George recognized it. Not from the shape of the buildings, those were gone. He recognized it from the land itself. The way the property sat on a slight rise above the surrounding fields. The angle of the dirt road that curved toward the parking lot. The old water tower in the background. The one that still read Refugio in white paint that had been flaking since the 1970s. Refugio Elementary School. Or what was left of it. The anchor's voice came into focus now, sharp and urgent above the footage. An EF3 tornado touched down late Monday evening in Refugio County, causing catastrophic damage to several structures, including Refugio Elementary School, which sustained near total destruction. School officials say the building was unoccupied at the time of the storm, but the damage has left over 300 students without a facility heading into the final weeks of the school year. County emergency management officials are. George leaned forward in his chair. The leather creaked under him. His elbows came to rest on his knees and his eyes fixed on the screen with an intensity that had nothing to do with the news, anchor, and everything to do with what he was seeing. The roof of the main building was gone entirely. The southern wing, the one that had housed the 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade classrooms, was a ruin of collapsed brick and tangled steel roofing. The large oak tree that had stood in the center of the playground, the one George had climbed with reckless frequency in the spring of 1962 when he was 9 years old, was lying on its side across what remained of the gymnasium wall. Its roots were in the air, still clutching a wide disk of red Texas earth. The reporter on the ground, a young woman in a blue blazer standing in front of a section of collapsed chain-link fence, was speaking with a woman George didn't recognize, a teacher, judging from the lanyard around her neck and the expression on her face. The kind of expression that doesn't come from news training, the kind that comes from walking into a place you've known for 20 years and finding it gone. We don't know where to begin," the teacher was saying, and her voice caught on the last word in a way that made it sound like a question. "These kids were supposed to finish their year here. They were supposed to graduate 5th grade here. And now," she looked at the rubble behind her and didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. George stood up. He wasn't sure when he had decided to stand. His body had done it before his mind caught up, a physical response to something that bypassed thought entirely and went straight to whatever part of a person holds the things they never fully put down. He had not been back to Refugio in 11 years, not since his father's funeral, which had been brief and attended by fewer people than George had expected, given that Robert Strait had lived in that county for 60 years. But attendance at funerals is a complicated calculation, and George had learned a long time ago that fame doesn't make the complicated things simpler. Sometimes it makes them considerably harder. He stood in front of the television with his socks on the hardwood floor and watched the footage loop, the helicopter shots, the teacher's broken sentence, the oak tree on its side. He thought about the smell of chalk dust and floor wax. He thought about the way the 3rd grade classroom had felt in the morning, cool and slightly damp, the windows fogged at the edges in winter. He thought about a woman named Mrs. Patricia Holloway, who had taught him to read properly, not just to decode words, but to understand that words were trying to tell you something, and that your job as a reader was to listen. He wondered if she was still alive. She would be in her 90s now, if she was. He thought about his father. He pushed that thought aside. He had gotten very good at that over the decades. It required no particular effort anymore, just a small, practiced motion, like closing a drawer you've been closing your whole life. He walked to the kitchen counter and picked up his phone. His assistant, a methodical and unflappable man named Kevin Doss, answered on the second ring. "Kevin," George said, "I need the direct number for Refugio Elementary School." Or whoever's in charge of it right now, principal, superintendent, whoever, today. There was a brief pause on the other end. "I just saw it on the news," Kevin said. "Give me 10 minutes. George set the phone on the counter and looked out the kitchen window at the back property. He could see Bubba in the distance, a small figure moving along the fence line with the unhurried deliberateness of a man who understood land work. The afternoon light was going golden the way it does in Texas in June, turning the dry grass into something almost beautiful. Kevin called back in 8 minutes. "Superintendent's name is Dr. Linda Cartwright," he said. "She's been with Refugio ISD for 12 years. Her direct office line is..." George wrote it down on the back of a grocery receipt that was sitting on the counter. He thanked Kevin and hung up. He looked at the number for a moment. Then he dialed. The phone rang 4 times, and George was preparing himself for voicemail when someone picked up. Not a receptionist, not an automated system, but a woman who answered with the slightly breathless quality of someone who had been answering calls without stopping for 2 days. "Refugio ISD Superintendent's Office. This is Dr. Linda Cartwright." "Dr. Cartwright," George said. "My name is George Strait. I'm calling from San Antonio. I saw the footage on the news this afternoon, and I went to school at Refugio Elementary a long time ago. I want to know what you need. Silence. Not the uncomfortable kind. The kind that happens when something unexpected lands in the middle of a very hard day, and the person receiving it needs a moment to understand that it's real." "Mr. Strait," Dr. Cartwright said, and her voice had changed, not softer exactly, but wider, as if she had taken a breath she hadn't been allowing herself. Yes, I know who you are. I'd imagine you have a lot of people calling," George said. "State officials, FEMA, insurance people. I'm not calling about any of that. I'm calling to ask what the school actually needs, not what the paperwork says. What do the kids need? What do the teachers need? What do you need? Another pause, shorter this time. Mr. Strait, I've been on the phone for 48 hours straight, and that is the first time anyone has asked me that exact question. George pulled out a kitchen chair and sat down. Then let's start there, he said. Dr. Linda Cartwright was 54 years old, had grown up in Corpus Christi, and had spent her entire professional life in South Texas public education. She was not a woman given to sentimentality or to being impressed by reputation. She had dealt with enough politicians and donors over the years to understand that public generosity is frequently more about the giver than the receiver. But there was something in George Strait's voice that she recognized as different, and it took her until the third minute of the conversation to identify what it was. He wasn't performing concern, he was simply concerned. She told him the honest version of things. Not the press release version, not the grant application version, but the actual version. 312 students in kindergarten through 5th grade with nowhere to go. The high school gymnasium was being used as a temporary classroom space, but it was inadequate, too loud, too hot, impossible to divide into separate learning environments for different grade levels. 4 teachers had already given notice, citing uncertainty about the school's future. The federal assistance application had been filed, but the timeline for approval was, as Linda put it, with careful restraint, not aligned with the reality of children needing to finish a school year. The building itself, she told him, had been condemned by the county engineer. It would need to be demolished and rebuilt entirely, not repaired. The insurance claim was filed but contested on several points. The district's operating budget had no reserve substantial enough to bridge the gap. What's the realistic number? George asked. If you were going to do this right, not just patch it together, but actually give those kids a real school. Modern, safe, built to last. What are we talking about? Linda Cartwright paused. Mr. Strait, I don't want to. I'm not asking you to be polite, he said. I'm asking you to be accurate. She was quiet for a moment. Then, somewhere between $4 and $6 million, depending on how quickly we need to move and what we build. A full rebuild, proper construction, modern safety standards, adequate size for current and projected enrollment. She paused again. That is not a number I expect anyone to. I'll need a few days, George said. I'm going to make some calls. In the meantime, can you get those kids somewhere with proper air conditioning? South Texas in June, we're working on it. There are portable classroom units coming from the district warehouse in Victoria, but they won't arrive until Thursday at the earliest. What about the teachers who gave notice? I've spoken with 2 of them. They're not unkind people. They have families. They need to know if there will be a school to come back to in August. I can't blame them. George was quiet for a moment. Tell them there will be, he said. Tell them I said so. Linda Cartwright did something then that she had not done in 2 days. She sat down. The call lasted 41 minutes. When George hung up, the kitchen was dimmer. The afternoon had advanced without him noticing, and the amber light had gone to something softer and more uncertain. Bubba came in through the back door, setting his gloves on the hook by the door, with the automatic precision of a man who had done it 10,000 times. Fence lines solid on the east side, he said. West side's got 2 posts that need replacing. He looked at his father's face. What happened? George told him. Bubba sat down at the kitchen table and listened without interrupting, which was one of the things about his son that George had always been most grateful for. The boy knew how to listen. When George finished, Bubba said, How much are you thinking? I don't know yet. At least $1 million from me personally to start. The rest I need to raise. I'm going to call Dale tonight, and then I'm going to call some people. Bubba nodded slowly. You want me to reach out to anyone? I know a couple contractors in the Corpus area who... Not yet. Let me talk to Dale first. I want to do this right. I don't want it to be a photo opportunity. I want it to be a school. Bubba studied his father for a moment. This isn't just about the tornado, is it? It wasn't a question. George looked at the grocery receipt with Linda Cartwright's number on it, still sitting on the counter. "No," he said. "It isn't." Bubba didn't push. He never pushed. He got up and started slicing the peaches his wife had left on the counter, and the two men sat in the quiet kitchen while the Texas's evening came down around them. And neither of them said anything for a long time, which was its own kind of conversation. That night, George sat at the small desk in his study, the room Norma had always called the real office, to distinguish it from the larger, more formal room where he occasionally took business meetings, and he made 11 phone calls. Dale Whitfield, his producer, picked up on the first ring and listened for 3 minutes without speaking. Then he said, "I know exactly who to call. Give me until tomorrow morning." The other 10 calls went to people whose names most Americans would recognize, fellow musicians, old friends, a handful of business people he had known for decades. He didn't pitch it. He told them what he had seen on the television, what Dr. Cartwright had told him, and what he intended to do. He told them about the oak tree lying on its side with its roots in the air. He told them about the teacher who couldn't finish her sentence. By midnight, he had commitments totaling $2.3 million. He sat back in the desk chair and looked at the framed photograph on the wall, the one taken in 1985, backstage at some venue he could no longer remember, in which he looked approximately 12 years old and completely terrified and completely alive all at once. He had been 23 years old in that photograph. His mother had been alive. His father had been alive, and their relationship had still been something that George believed, in those days, could be repaired if he could just find the right way in. He had not found it, but that was a story for another time. That was a drawer he kept closed. He turned off the desk lamp and went to bed. He did not sleep well, but he had not expected to. George drove into Refugio 3 days later, alone. He had told Kevin he didn't want a convoy, didn't want media, didn't want anything that would turn a visit into an event before it had a chance to be real. Kevin had pushed back, citing security and optics, and George had listened patiently and then done what he intended to do anyway, which was drive his truck down Highway 183 with a thermos of black coffee and the radio on low. It was a 2-hour drive from San Antonio through the Mesquite and the coastal plains, past the flat brown stretches of land that most people flying over Texas assume are empty, but are in fact dense with a kind of life that doesn't announce itself. Cattle, brush, water towers, small towns built around a single main intersection, each one with a feed store and a church and a school and a diner that had been there for 50 years and had the menu to prove it. George had made this drive dozens of times over his life. The landscape was so familiar to him that he had stopped seeing it, the way you stop seeing the walls of a room you've lived in for years. But this morning it seemed to present itself again. The wide sky, the Mesquite, the way the light came off the coastal plain in a flat, direct way that has no shadows to hide in. He found himself driving slower than he needed to. He pulled off the highway once, just outside of Goliad, and finished his coffee in the parking lot of a closed gas station. He sat in the truck and looked at the Mesquite and thought about his father. Robert Earl Strait had been a man of few words, most of them useful and none of them particularly warm. He had ranched the same piece of land outside Pearsall for 40 years, had raised his son with the specific philosophy that comfort made a person weak, and had died at 87 in the same hospital where George had been born, in a room with a window that faced the parking lot. George had been there at the end. They had sat together for 4 hours, mostly in silence, and there had been a moment, 10 minutes before the end, when Robert had looked at his son with an expression George had never been able to fully decode. Not pride, exactly. Not apology. Something older than either of those things. He had never asked what it meant, and then the window for asking had closed. There was a specific kind of grief that comes not from losing someone, but from losing the possibility of resolution. George had been carrying that grief for 11 years and had gotten reasonably good at living around it. The way you learn to live around a piece of furniture that's too heavy to move, you just adjust your path. He put the truck in drive and kept going. Refugio was a town of approximately 3,000 people on the coastal bend of South Texas. It had the architectural character common to small Texas towns of a certain vintage, a main street with storefronts that had been updated at inconsistent intervals, a courthouse square with a large pecan tree, a water tower, and the particular quality of light and sound that belongs to places where most people have known each other for decades. George had left Refugio at 9 years old when his family moved to Pearsall, and had returned only rarely in the years since, the occasional concert within driving distance, his father's funeral, a brief stop years ago during a drive to Corpus. But the town had remained inside him in the way childhood places do. Not as a set of conscious memories, but as a physical grammar, a way the body recognizes scale and proportion and smell. The school was on the eastern edge of town, set back from County Road 774 behind the chain-link fence George had seen on television. The fence was still standing along the road, which seemed wrong in the way that minor details often survive disasters intact, while the substantial things do not. He pulled into the gravel parking lot and sat in the truck for a moment. From here, the destruction was even more complete than the aerial footage had suggested. The main building was a low ruin, brick walls standing to inconsistent heights, the roof entirely gone, debris spread outward in the pattern of a thing that had been turned inside out. The southern wing was a collapse. The gymnasium wall still had the oak tree leaning against it, and the tree, George now saw, had taken most of the gymnasium roof down with it. The playground equipment was largely intact. The swings, the jungle gym, the painted four-square court on the asphalt. That too seemed wrong. The things built for children had survived, and the structure built to protect them had not. He got out of the truck. Dr. Linda Cartwright was already there. He had called ahead that morning, and she had offered to meet him at her office, and he had said the school seemed more appropriate. She was standing near the main entrance with a younger man George didn't know, and as he walked toward her, he formed an impression of her that matched what her voice had suggested. A woman who operated with precision and without wasted motion, who had probably been the smartest person in most rooms she'd ever been in, and had found some accommodation with that fact. She was medium height, wore her dark hair pulled back, and had the particular quality of controlled exhaustion that comes from days of crises. Management, clear-eyed, but running on something thinner than ordinary energy. "Mr. Strait," she said, extending her hand. Her handshake was firm without being performative. "George," he said. "Please," she nodded. "This is Tom Decker, our head of facilities. He's been managing the assessment process." Tom Decker was in his late 30s, broad-shouldered, with the sunburn and calloused hands of a man who spent most of his time outdoors. He shook George's hand and said, "Appreciate you coming down, sir," with the directness of someone who meant it straightforwardly and nothing more. "Walk me through it," George said. Tom walked him through it. They spent 40 minutes moving through the ruins of the school, Tom explaining what had happened structurally. The tornado had tracked northeast across the property, generating peak winds that the county engineer estimated at 140 miles per hour. The main building's roof had gone first, and without the lateral support of the roof structure, the exterior walls had progressively failed. The southern wing had been hit by a secondary debris surge that had accelerated the collapse. The gymnasium wall had been struck by the oak tree, which had acted as a battering ram. George walked through it all quietly, asking occasional questions about specifics, the age of the building, the construction materials, the foundation condition. Tom answered each one with the confident brevity of someone who had been living inside these details for 3 days. Linda walked with them but didn't interject. She was watching George noticed, not in a guarded way, but with the evaluative attention of someone taking accurate measure. At the edge of what had been the main entrance, George stopped. The original front doors were gone, blown off the frame and deposited, Tom explained, in the field behind the gymnasium. but the concrete threshold was intact, and on either side of the doorway, the brick columns that had framed the entrance were still standing, though one was cracked. Above one of the columns, a section of original signage was still attached, white painted letters on a long aluminum panel, missing the first few letters but reading, Fugio Elementary School. George stood at the threshold for a moment without speaking. "You said you attended here?" Linda asked. "Third and part of fourth grade," he said. "My father worked a lease property out on Route 202 for a couple years before we moved to Pearsall." He paused. "I had a teacher named Mrs. Holloway. Patricia Holloway. Third grade. She passed away 6 years ago. She'd taught here for 31 years. There's a reading room named for her in the library." She paused. Or there was. George looked at the ruins. "She was the first person who ever told me I could do something worth doing," he said. It was not the kind of thing he said often or in most company, and he said it without particular emphasis, the way you state a fact that doesn't need decoration. Linda nodded once. She didn't say anything. The moment had its own sufficient weight. They sat in Linda's temporary office, a space she had commandeered in the municipal building 2 blocks from the school, for 2 hours that afternoon. Linda laid out the full picture, the insurance dispute, which centered on whether the damage was covered under the district's existing policy or required a separate catastrophic weather provision that the insurer was contesting. The federal assistance application, which was in process but would not produce funding on any timeline relevant to the current school year, the portable classrooms arriving Thursday, and the question of long-term reconstruction, which required both funding and a site plan, the latter being complicated by new FEMA floodplain guidelines that had come into effect in the previous year. George listened to all of it. He asked Tom Decker questions about the site plan. He asked Linda about the 4 teachers who had given notice and whether any had been persuaded to stay. "2 of them are staying," Linda said. "I told them what you told me to tell them, that there would be a school in August. I want you to know I don't make promises I can't keep, and I told them that on the basis of your word." "Then my word is good," George said. "What do you need me to do first?" "We need a lead contractor, someone who can break ground in August. The county has a list of qualified firms, but the timeline is, I know a man in San Antonio," George said. "His name is Frank Brennan. He built a children's hospital in Austin 3 years ago, under budget and ahead of schedule. I'll call him today." Linda wrote it down. "The second thing is the insurance dispute," she continued. "We have legal counsel, but they're a small firm and this is outside their usual scope. The insurer they're not acting in obvious bad faith, but they're not acting in urgency either. I know a lawyer," George said. Linda looked up from her notepad. "She handles insurance disputes and construction law," George said. "Her name is Helen Whitmore, Dallas-based, but she does Texas-wide. She'll take this case. I'll call her this afternoon." For the first time since he had arrived, Linda Cartwright allowed herself something close to a smile. "You seem like a man who knows a lot of people, George. 40 years in the music business," he said. "You collect either enemies or allies. I tried to collect the more useful kind." He left the municipal building at 4:30 and drove to the eastern edge of town, where County Road 202 cut south through flat ranch land toward the coast. The lease property where his family had lived was no longer there. The house had been torn down decades ago, replaced by a metal equipment barn that served whoever was working the land now. But the land itself was the same, flat, coastal, cut by a dry creek bed that ran east toward the bay. George pulled over and got out, and stood by the truck in the late afternoon heat. He had been 9 years old here. He had walked this road to school on mornings when his father didn't have time to drive him, which was most mornings. The walk was 3 miles. In September, it was brutal. The South Texas heat in September is not a negotiating partner, and in January the coastal wind came off the Gulf with a cold that was damp and bone-specific in a way that dry cold never is. He had walked it anyway. He had been a quiet child, the kind of quiet that adults sometimes mistake for obedience, but is actually a different thing, the quiet of a a child who has learned to make themselves small in a particular environment, not unhappy, just careful. His father had not been a cruel man. That was the complication that had taken George decades to understand. Robert Strait had not been unkind in the way that leaves visible marks. He had been withholding in the way that doesn't leave visible marks, and that is sometimes harder to name and harder to heal. George stood by the truck and looked at the flat land and the dry creek bed and the late afternoon sky, and thought about a boy who walked 3 miles to school because his father was busy. And then he thought about what Dr. Linda Cartwright had said. Pat Holloway. She taught here for 31 years. Mrs. Holloway had seen something in that quiet, careful boy that the boy's own father hadn't appeared to notice. She had made him read aloud in front of the class, not because he was the best reader. He wasn't. But because she had told him privately, with the direct simplicity of a woman who had no time for indirection, that his voice had something in it worth hearing. He had been 9 years old. He hadn't known what she meant. He had spent the next 60 years finding out. On the drive back to San Antonio, his phone rang. It was a number he didn't recognize, Texas area code, Refugio prefix. Mr. Strait, I hope I'm not. This is Betty Alcott. I got your number from Dr. Cartwright's office. I hope that's all right. I'm a 4th grade teacher at Refugio Elementary. I was a 4th grade teacher. A pause. I was one of the ones who gave notice. George kept his eyes on the highway. I remember Linda mentioning you. You're thinking of staying. I am. I already called her back this afternoon. I wanted to call you directly and say thank you. I have 12 years in this district. I wasn't leaving because I wanted to. I was leaving because I thought I thought it was gone. Her voice was controlled, but only just. My daughter was a student there, 4th grade. Different year, obviously. And her daughter, my granddaughter, she was supposed to start kindergarten there in August. George was quiet for a moment. She will, he said. You have my word. Betty Alcott made a sound that wasn't quite a word. Then she said, my grandmother taught school in this county for 40 years. She always said that some buildings are more than buildings. I think she was right. I think she was too, George said. He drove the rest of the way home in silence with the radio off. 2 weeks into the project, the fundraising concert was Dale Whitfield's idea. George had initially resisted. He had wanted the effort to be logistical, not performative. He was already coordinating with Frank Brennan on the construction timeline, with Helen Whitmore on the insurance dispute, and with Kevin Does on a network of corporate donors that had grown to include 4 major Texas-based companies. The money was moving. The work was real. The last thing he wanted was to turn it into a spectacle. Dale had listened to all of this and then said, with the patience of a man who had known George Strait for 30 years, George, you are describing a $2 million problem with a $4 million solution. The corporate donors are committed to 1.8. You have personal commitments of 1.2. That's $3 million. The construction estimate from Brennan is 4.4. You're short. The concert fills the gap, and it creates awareness that brings in the smaller donations that sustain the operating fund long term. This is not about spectacle. This is about math. George had sat with this for 2 days. Then he called Dale back and said, one night, San Antonio. Outdoors, if we can manage it. No corporate sponsors on the stage. And I want it to feel like a community event, not a gala. Dale said, I know exactly what you mean, and George believed him. The concert was set for the last Saturday in July, which gave them 6 weeks to plan and put the announcement out far enough in advance to sell tickets, but not so far that the urgency of the moment dissipated. Dale worked the logistics with the efficiency of a man who had organized events across 4 decades and knew exactly which problems would occur and in what sequence. The venue was a park on the north side of San Antonio, an outdoor amphitheater with a capacity of 12,000, with a natural slope that allowed for a lawn section behind the reserved seating. Dale booked it with a single phone call. The lineup came together quickly. 6 of the artists George had called in that first night had said yes before he could finish the sentence. 3 more signed on within the week. The headliner was, by unanimous agreement, George himself, a full set. Not a cameo, not a brief appearance, but a genuine show. The kind of show he still knew how to give, and that he gave when he gave it, with the particular authority of someone who has been doing the thing for 40 years and knows exactly what it is. Tickets went on sale on a Tuesday morning and were gone by noon. George drove back to Refugio 10 days before the concert, this time not alone. He brought Bubba and Brooke and Frank Brennan and Helen Whitmore, who had by that point successfully forced the insurance company into a mediation process that was, as she described it with professional satisfaction, not going well for them. They spent the day at the school site, walking the property with Tom Decker and the Brennan construction site manager, a compact and methodical man named Cal Rutherford, who spoke in measurements and load-bearing specifications with the quiet intensity of someone for whom precision was a point of personal pride. The demolition of the remaining structures was scheduled for the following week. Groundbreaking on the new building was set for mid-August, with a target completion date the following June, a timeline that Brennan had reviewed 3 times and pronounced achievable if the weather cooperated and the supply chain held. Linda Cartwright joined them for the afternoon walkthrough. She had, in the 3 weeks since George's first visit, acquired the particular energy of a person who has gone from managing a crisis to executing a plan, still stretched thin, still carrying the weight of 300 students in temporary classrooms under portable roofs in South Texas summer heat, but moving now with forward momentum instead of the sideways scramble of emergency response. She and George walked the perimeter of the property together while the others discussed specifications with Cal Rutherford. The portable classrooms are functioning, she told him. It's not ideal, the heat, the noise level, the lack of separation between grades, but the teachers have adapted better than I expected. Betty Alcott has been remarkable. She essentially designed a rotational schedule that uses the gymnasium and the parking lot shade structures as supplemental learning spaces. I want to meet her, George said. She'll be at the concert. Half the town will be at the concert. Linda paused. 300 people from Refugio have bought tickets. I helped organize a bus. George looked at her. A bus? 2 buses, actually. She said it without self-consciousness. Most of these families have never seen a concert like this. A lot of the kids have never been to San Antonio, I thought. She paused. The concert isn't just about money. It's about those kids understanding that people beyond their county know they exist. That matters. George stopped walking. He looked at her for a moment, and she met his gaze with the direct clarity that seemed to be her natural mode of being. You're a remarkable person, Dr. Cartwright, he said. Linda, she said, please, you've been calling me that for 3 weeks. He almost smiled. Linda, then. They resumed walking. After a moment, she said, Can I ask you something directly? That seems to be your style, he said. The teachers you spoke to on the phone those first days. The way you spoke to them. The way you spoke to me. That wasn't the way someone talks who just saw a news story and felt guilty. That was personal. In a specific way. She paused. What happened here? For you. What is this about? George was quiet for long enough that she might have decided she had overstepped, and he watched her prepare for the possibility. My father, he said. He grew up in this county. Before Pearsall, before everything, he was born 20 miles from here. He stopped walking and looked at the ruins of the school. He was a difficult man to know. I spent most of my life trying and not quite getting there. And then he died, and the trying stopped having an object. He paused. I've been carrying that for 11 years. Linda didn't speak. She was, he had come to understand, a woman who knew when silence was the right response. Coming back here it's not resolution exactly, but it's something. This place was the last place I remember being a child without knowing yet what my father was. He paused, before I understood the distance. Linda looked at the school. My father was distant too, she said. Not unkind, just elsewhere, even when he was in the room. She paused. I think a lot of us built our lives in the direction that absence pointed us. George looked at her. I think that might be the truest thing anyone has said to me in years, he said. That evening, after Bub and Brooke had driven back to San Antonio, and Frank Brennan had gone to his hotel in Victoria, George sat on the tailgate of his truck in the gravel parking lot of the school and called Dale Whitfield. I want to change something about the concert, he said. Tell me, Dale said. I want to dedicate the show, not in a generic way. I want to dedicate it to a specific person. Who? Mrs. Patricia Holloway, 3rd grade teacher, Refugio Elementary, 31 years. She passed 6 years ago. He paused. She's the reason I learned that my voice was worth something. She told me directly, the way good teachers do. I never told her what that meant. I want to tell it now. Dale was quiet for a moment. We can put something in the program, he said. And you can say something from the stage. I want to find her family, George said. I want whoever is left, kids, grandkids, anyone, to have tickets, front row. I want them to hear it in person. Kevin can track that down. Give me 2 days. George hung up and sat on the tailgate and looked at the dark Texas sky. The coastal plain is flat enough that from almost anywhere in Refugio County, you can see a remarkable expanse of sky, not the vertical drama of the hill country or the high desert, but a wide, horizontal immensity that doesn't impress you so much as include you. George had forgotten how much sky there was here. He had not forgotten the feeling of being small under it, in the way that small is not frightening but simply accurate. He had spent 40 years learning to stand up large in front of crowds of 40,000 people, and he was genuinely good at it, and it was genuinely him. But underneath all of that, in some room that the fame never fully reached, there was still a 9-year-old boy on a flat coastal plain with a lot of sky overhead, and a teacher who had told him his voice was worth something. He owed her a dedication. He was 40 years late, but he intended to make it count. 2 days before the concert, Kevin Doss called with the information about Patricia Holloway's family. She had 2 living children, a son named James Holloway, 61 years old, retired, living in Corpus Christi, and a daughter named Carol Fenn, 58, who still lived in Refugio and had, Kevin informed George with characteristic efficiency, a daughter who is currently enrolled in 4th grade at the temporary Refugio Elementary setup. George called James Holloway first. The man picked up on the 3rd ring, and there was a particular caution in his voice, the caution of someone in their 60s who has learned that unexpected calls sometimes carry unexpected things. Mr. Holloway, my name is George Strait. I knew your mother when I was a boy. She was my 3rd grade teacher. A pause. She had a lot of students, James Holloway said. Not coldly, just factually, the way a child of a beloved teacher learns to contextualize the scale of their parents' impact. I know she did, George said. I'm calling because I'm about to play a concert that benefits her school, and I want to dedicate the show to her. And I want her family there to hear it. Front row, if you're willing. The pause this time was longer. She talked about her students, James said. His voice had changed. She talked about them all the time, right up until she couldn't anymore. He paused. She didn't follow the music industry much. But I think she would have known who you are. I hope so, George said. I hope she knew what she did for me. What did she do for you, Mr. Strait? His voice was direct and without challenge, genuinely asking. George looked out the window of his study at the Texas evening. She told me to use my voice, he said, at a time in my life when I had a lot of reasons not to believe it was worth using. James Holloway was quiet for a moment. Then he said, she told me the same thing once. About a different kind of voice. I was 17 and I wanted to quit school, and she sat down with me at the kitchen table and she said, James, you have a way of explaining things that makes them make sense to other people. That is not a small thing. He paused. I became a high school teacher. 30 years, just retired. George didn't speak for a moment. She was right about you too then, he said. "Yeah," James Holloway said. "Yeah, she was." They talked for 20 minutes. Before they hung up, James had accepted 4 tickets, front row, as George had promised, and had agreed to bring his sister Carol and Carol's daughter and granddaughter, the 4th grader who is currently doing her schoolwork in a portable classroom under a South Texas summer sky. The day of the concert arrived with the specific clarity that Texas summer nights sometimes offer without warning, the brutal heat of the afternoon breaking around 7 o'clock into something moving and reasonable. The sky going from white-hot to deep blue in the long hour before dark, and a south wind coming off the Gulf that carried the smell of grass and distance. George arrived at the venue at 4 in the afternoon for sound check, alone for the first hour while the band set up. He stood at the center of the stage and looked at the 12,000 empty seats and the open lawn beyond. And he felt what he always felt before a show. Not nerves, exactly, which had left him sometime in the early 90s, but a kind of charged readiness, the body's equivalent of a tuning fork being struck. The band filtered in gradually. His touring musicians knew him well enough to know that soundcheck was efficient and focused, that he didn't do it for show and didn't need affirmation. They ran through 8 songs in 40 minutes and he made 3 adjustments to the monitor mix and then stepped off the stage and went to the dressing room. Kevin Doss was there with the evening's logistics. Linda Cartwright had arrived with the 2 buses from Refugio, 300 people, ranging from parents with small children to elderly residents who had been in the district for decades. They were in the reserve section on the left side closest to the stage, which George had asked Kevin to arrange. The Holloway family, James, Carol, Carol's daughter Megan, and Megan's daughter, the 9-year-old 4th grader named Lily, were in the front row, seats 4 through 7. "Lily brought a drawing she made for you," Kevin said, with the slightly amused expression of a man who relayed unusual information with professional neutrality. Her teacher helped her get it to the security team. "Hold it for me," George said. "I want to see it after." Dale Whitfield appeared at 6:30, running through the show order one final time. 5 opening acts, staggered over 3 hours, each playing 40 minutes. George would close. His set was 90 minutes, with the possibility of extending to 110, depending on how the crowd was reading. "The coverage request list is long," Dale said. "CMT, local affiliates, Houston Chronicle, AP. Keep the cameras out of the dedicated section," George said. "The Refugio families didn't come here to be on television. Let them have the night." Dale made a note. "There's also a request from a journalist at the Texas Tribune, feature piece on the school project. She wants a few minutes with you before the show." George thought about it. "After the show, tell her after." The journalist's name was Ann Whitfield, no relation to Dale. She had told Kevin with the slight exasperation of someone who had been making that clarification for several weeks. She was 37 years old, had covered education and community affairs in Texas for 11 years, and had the focused, slightly underslept quality of someone permanently between deadlines. George met her backstage at 11 o'clock after the last encore, when the crowd had begun to filter out and the night air carried the residual warmth of 12,000 people and the smell of trampled grass. He was still in his stage clothes, dark jeans, the black shirt, the white hat, and slightly damp from the last hour of the show, and he had the loose, open quality that he sometimes had in the immediate aftermath of a performance, before the professional armor fully reassembled itself. Ann Whitfield had a recorder and a notebook, and a pen that she clicked and declicked while she thought. She asked him first about the mechanics, the fundraising total, the construction timeline, the insurance dispute. He answered those questions with the precision that came from 3 weeks of immersion in the details. Then she asked, "Can you tell me why this school specifically? You've been asked about your philanthropy before, and the answers are usually fairly general. But this seems different." George was quiet for a moment. "I went to school there," he said, "for 2 years when I was a boy. And there was a teacher, Mrs. Patricia Holloway, who told me something about myself that changed the way I saw what I could do." He paused. "I never found a way to tell her what that meant. She died 6 years ago. Tonight, I dedicated the show to her, and her family was in the front row." Anne Whitfield was writing quickly. "Was there anything else that brought you back, beyond Mrs. Holloway?" George looked at her directly. He had decided sometime in the days before the concert that he was going to answer this question honestly if it was asked, because dishonesty in this particular context felt like a betrayal of the thing he was trying to do. "My father," he said. "He grew up in Refugio County. He's been gone 11 years. He was a man I could never get close to no matter how hard I tried, and I spent a long time after his death carrying the weight of that unresolved. Coming back here, to the place where I was before I understood that distance, that's part of this. It's not separate from it." Anne Whitfield stopped writing and looked at him. "That's going in the piece," she said. "I know," he said. After the journalist had gone, George walked back through the backstage area to the edge of the stage. The venue was mostly empty now, the tech crew breaking down equipment, the cleaning staff working through the lawn section with flashlights and garbage bags. The south wind was still moving, warm and carrying the smell of the night. James Holloway was standing near the stage side exit with his sister Carol. Their expressions were the kind that don't translate well to description, the particular combination of grief and gratitude, and something beyond both that appears on a person's face when they have been given something they didn't know they needed. George walked over to them. James Holloway extended his hand, and George took it, and the handshake lasted longer than handshakes usually do. She would have been. James stopped. He pressed his lips together and tried again. "She would have been very glad, I know," George said. Carol Fenn, who had her mother's directness, said, "Lily keeps asking me if she can give you the drawing now. She's been waiting very patiently for 2 hours." George looked past them and saw the 9-year-old, dark-haired, serious-faced, holding a folded piece of paper in both hands with the formality of someone delivering a document of importance. Her teacher, Betty Alcott, who had driven down from Refugio separately, was standing beside her with a hand on her shoulder. George crouched down to be at eye level. "I heard you made me something," he said. Lily Fenn unfolded the paper and held it up. It was a crayon drawing of a school, a new school, clearly, with large windows and a green roof, and children in the foreground, and at the center of the image, a large tree. An oak tree, standing upright with full branches. George looked at it for a long moment. "This is what it's going to look like?" he asked. Lily nodded with the gravity of someone explaining an architectural vision. "It needs a tree," she said. "A big one, like the one that fell down." "It does need a tree," George agreed. "I'll make sure it has one." He stood up and folded the drawing carefully and put it in the breast pocket of his shirt. Betty Alcott, who had been watching all of this, met George's eyes over the child's head. Hers were bright. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. The final accounting came in the following morning. Kevin Doss called at 8:30 with the numbers from the ticketing, the merchandise sales, the online donations generated by the media coverage, and the additional corporate commitments that had come in during the 48 hours following the concert announcement in major Texas media. Total raised $4,840,000 against a construction estimate of $4.4 million with a contingency allocation. George sat in the kitchen with his coffee and did the math. "That's enough," he said. "That's more than enough," Kevin confirmed. "The overage Dr. Cartwright's already called about it. She wants to talk about establishing an operating fund for the district. Something sustainable." George nodded, though Kevin couldn't see him. "Tell her I'll call her this afternoon," he said. And Kevin, "Yes. Thank you for the last 3 weeks, for all of it." Kevin, who was not a demonstrative man, said, "It's the best work I've done. I mean that seriously." George finished his coffee and looked out the kitchen window at the ranch in the early morning light, the fence line that Bubba had checked 3 weeks ago, the hill country in the distance, The slow, reliable, unhurried morning that a piece of land offers if you let it. He thought about his father, not with the old heaviness this time. Not with the drawer-closing motion that had been his default for a decade. Just with the kind of clear-eyed recognition that comes when you have finally done something that was waiting to be done. Robert Earl Strait had grown up in Refugio County and had left without resolution, as people do. He had raised his son with distance and withholding, and the specific kind of silence that says, "I don't know how to give you what you need." He had not been a cruel man. He had been a limited man. And limited men sometimes have sons who spend their whole lives building what the fathers couldn't. Not out of resentment, but out of the particular stubbornness of love that refuses to accept the limits it was handed. George didn't know if that was true of him. He wasn't sure you could know it about yourself with confidence, but it felt proximate to true, and after 11 years of carrying the unresolved weight, proximate to true was enough. He picked up his phone and called Linda Cartwright. Ground was broken on the new Refugio Elementary School on the 14th of August. On a Tuesday morning that arrived with a light coastal overcast and a temperature that was, by South Texas standards, almost forgiving. The ceremony was small by choice. Linda Cartwright had wanted it that way, and so had George. There were no politicians on the stage, no speeches from officials. There was Tom Decker in a hard hat and Cal Rutherford from Brennan Construction, and the principal of the school, a quiet and steady man named David Park, who had been in his position for 3 years and had managed the entire crises with a composure that had not gone unnoticed by anyone who had worked with him. There was a row of chairs for the students, a representative group of 30 children, one from each class, chosen by their teachers. They sat in the front row with the careful posture of children who have been told that something important is happening and have decided to take that seriously. And there was Betty Alcott and James Holloway and Carol Fenn and Linda Cartwright with a shovel that had seen better days, and George Strait in a white hat and without a guitar, which felt right for this particular occasion. The remarks were brief. Linda said what needed to be said about the community's resilience and the generosity that had made the moment possible, and she said it without flourish or excess because that was how she spoke. David Park thanked the teaching staff with the specific names and details, gratitude of someone who had actually been paying attention to what they had done. Then George stepped up. He had written nothing down. He had a general idea of what he wanted to say, and trusted the moment to supply the rest, which was how he had always approached the things that mattered most. He looked at the 30 children in the front row. "My name is George Strait," he said, "and when I was 9 years old I sat in a classroom about 40 feet from where we're standing right now, and a teacher told me something I hadn't known about myself. She told me my voice was worth something. I didn't know what to do with that at the time, but I kept it. And everything that came after, everything I've been lucky enough to do with my life, came from that seed she planted." He paused. Her name was Mrs. Patricia Holloway, and she's not here today, but her family is. He looked at James and Carol, who were standing to the side. "What a teacher plants, it doesn't disappear when the walls come down," he said. "It goes on in the people who are inside those walls. And the walls come back. That's what today is." He looked back at the 30 children. "This school will be standing when you're my age. The things you learn inside it, the things someone tells you about yourself that you didn't know, those will still be going on long after the walls are gone again." He paused. "Take what your teachers give you. It's the most important thing you'll ever be handed." He stepped back. The children in the front row were quiet with the particular attentiveness of children who have understood something without necessarily having words for it yet. Linda handed him a shovel. He took it, positioned it at the marked spot in the cleared ground, and pushed it in. The earth turned. Over the following months, George drove to Refugio 7 more times. Not all of them were planned. Twice he was in the area, once for a show in Corpus Christi, once passing through on a drive, he told. Bubba was just a drive, and that Bubba accepted without comment, and he stopped at the construction site to walk the perimeter with Cal Rutherford and watch what was being built. The new building was rising faster than George had expected. Frank Brennan had been right about Cal Rutherford. The man ran a site with a quiet, methodical authority that produced results without drama. The foundation was in by mid-September. The framing was complete by late October. The walls were going up in November with the particular speed that comes when every piece of the supply chain and every member of the crew is operating in alignment. George would park his truck in the gravel lot and walk the site in a hard hat that Cal had gotten him, white, like his regular hat, which the crew took as a deliberate choice and George allowed them to believe. And he would watch the new school emerging from the cleared ground with the feeling that some things take exactly as long as they need to take, and no longer. He called Linda from the site on one of those visits in late October, standing in what would become the main hallway of the building, the framing overhead and the Texas sky visible through the open roof structure. The library is going to be bigger than the original, he said. Cal walked me through it this morning. I know, she said. I approved the change order last week. We had the contingency allocation. What are you naming it? She paused. We were going to keep the Holloway name for the reading room. Now it'll be the full library. Good, George said. The new name for the main building, she continued, is something the school board discussed at the September meeting. I wanted to ask your opinion before I tell you what they decided. George looked up at the open Texas sky through the framing. Tell me, he said. They voted to name it the George Strait Learning Center. She paused. It was unanimous, including the one board member who famously votes no on everything as a matter of personal principle. George was quiet for a moment. I'd rather it was named for someone who taught here, he said. Someone who did the actual work. Then you should have thought about that before you built them a school, Linda said, with the dry precision that had become. Over 3 months of working together, something George genuinely looked forward to. The board has voted. I have been informed by David Park that the students have already started practicing how to say it. George leaned against a framing beam and looked at the sky. Well, he said. All right then. The Patricia Holloway Memorial Library was a room with 3 south-facing windows, 12 feet of shelving on the east wall, a reading nook with cushioned benches built into the corner, and a small bronze plaque beside the entrance that read, in honor of Patricia Ann Holloway, teacher, Refugio Elementary School, 1971 to 2002. She taught 31 years in this building, and what she planted in the people who passed through here continues growing still. The text had been written by James Holloway, who had sent it to Linda Cartwright in an email at 11 o'clock on a Sunday night with a single line of context. I've been working on this for 2 weeks. I think this is it. Linda had forwarded it to George without comment. George had forwarded it to the bronze work fabricator with the instruction, exactly as written, nothing added. The school reopened on the second Tuesday of June, 11 months after the tornado, with the full student body of 312, plus an additional 27 students who had transferred in from neighboring districts. Drawn by the new facility, and by the particular quality of attention that a community gives to something it has just fought to rebuild. George was there for the first day. He had told Linda he would come quietly, no announcement, and she had agreed. And Kevin Doss had arranged for him to stand at the side of the main entrance as the students arrived in the morning, which is what he did. He watched the buses pull in. He watched children pour off them with the specific morning energy of children who have been held back by a constraint they couldn't name and now suddenly aren't. He watched them run, actually run, not the organized movement of temporary classrooms, but the full, undirected running of children on their own ground, across the new asphalt and onto the new playground, and into the bright, wide hallways of the new building. Lily Fenn was there. She was wearing a red backpack approximately half her height and carrying a lunchbox in each hand. which her mother explained was because she had insisted on carrying her own and had then decided to carry her younger cousins as well. George spoke to her briefly near the main entrance. She informed him with the methodical seriousness that appeared to be her defining characteristic, that she had verified the new tree was in the right place. The tree had been planted the previous month, a live oak, 8 years old, selected from a nursery in Victoria by Cal Rutherford with the same precision he applied to structural specifications. It stood in the center of the new playground, its trunk approximately 4 inches in diameter, its canopy still modest but already casting a circle of shade on the new asphalt below. "It's going to be big," Lily said. "In a long time." "In a long time," George agreed. She looked at him with the evaluative directness of a child who has not yet learned to hide her assessments. "Are you going to come back?" she asked. "I imagine I will," George said. She nodded, apparently satisfied, and disappeared through the main entrance with her 2 lunchboxes. Betty Alcott found him near the library before her first class began. She looked different than she had on the night of the concert. Steadier, maybe, or simply rested in a way that showed on her face. She was carrying a stack of books under one arm and a coffee in her hand, and she stopped when she saw him. "First day," she said. "First day," he agreed. She looked at the hallway around them, the new floors, the painted walls, the rows of lockers that still smelt of fresh paint and manufacture. "It's better," she said, "than the old one. It breaks my heart to say it because I loved the old one, but this is better." "That's what rebuilding is supposed to do," George said. Betty looked at him for a moment. 12 years in this school," she said, "and I almost left. I was 2 days from sending the resignation letter." She shook her head slightly. "Sometimes I think about what I would have missed." "Don't think about it," George said. "You stayed." She smiled, a real one, the kind that comes from somewhere deep enough to be reliable. "I stayed," she said. The first bell rang and she went to her classroom, and George stood in the hallway and listened to the sound of 300 children finding their seats in a building that belonged to them. He called Dale Whitfield from the parking lot. "How was it?" Dale asked. "It was right," George said. "It was exactly right. You thinking about the album?" George looked at the new school, the live oak in the playground, the south-facing windows of the Holloway Library catching the morning light. "Yeah," he said, "I'm thinking about it." "Good, because I have a title for you." George waited. "The drawer that opened," Dale said. George was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Where did you hear that?" "In Whitfield's piece in the Texas Tribune 3 weeks ago. She quoted you. She said you told her about closing a drawer your whole life, about your father." Dale paused. "It's a title, George. It's exactly the kind of title you've been looking for." George leaned against his truck and looked at the sky. The coastal overcast was thinning. The June sun was beginning to come through in the way it does on the South Texas coast. Not gradually, but all at once, as if a decision had been made. "Let me think about it," he said. Dale Whitfield, who knew what that meant, smiled on his end of the call. "I'll book the studio for September," he said, "same as always." There is a specific quality to the kind of change that happens slowly, and then all at once, the change that has been accumulating. In the long silences and the shut drawers and the drives along flat roads with the radio on low. And then one afternoon breaks open like a June sky clearing on the South Texas coast. George Strait drove home through the mesquite and the coastal plain and the small towns with their water towers and feed stores and churches. And the drive felt different than it had 11 months ago. Not because the road had changed, but because he had arrived somewhere. In the way that you sometimes arrive somewhere, not by moving toward it, but by finally stopping moving away. His father was not resolved. That was not the lesson. People who die with the distance intact don't become resolved because you build a school, or dedicate a concert, or stand in a parking lot under a June sky and think the right thoughts. They remain what they were, limited and loved anyway. In the way that you love the things that shaped you, even when the shaping left marks. But George understood now that carrying the weight of the unresolved was a choice, and that choices, unlike facts, could be altered. He had come back to Refugio with the weight of 11 years and a closed drawer, and he was leaving with something different. Not lighter, exactly. The weight didn't disappear, but distributed differently. Shared with 300 students and a Holloway library and a 9-year-old girl with a red backpack. And a live oak tree in a playground that would be large and magnificent in a long time. You don't have to resolve the past to live forward from it. That was the thing, Mrs. Patricia Holloway had known about a 9-year-old boy on a flat coastal plain. A boy who was being raised by a man who didn't know how to be close. She had seen that the boy had something worth using, and she had told him so. And the word had traveled 60 years and 1,000 stages and 100,000 miles of highway and had arrived, finally, back where it started. Some seeds take a long time, but they don't stop growing. The George Strait Learning Center at Refugio Elementary School opened its library to students for the first time on a Thursday morning in June, 3 weeks after the building opened. The librarian, a warm and meticulous woman named Donna Reyes, who had been with the district for 8 years and had spent the tornado year digitizing the district's entire catalog in anticipation of a library that didn't yet exist, had arranged the shelves with the care of someone who understood that the placement of books is itself a form of teaching. The first student through the library door was Lily Fenn. She walked directly to the third shelf on the east wall, the one Donna had labeled picture books, and selected a book with the decisiveness of someone who had known what they were looking for before they arrived. She carried it to the reading nook, settled herself on the cushioned bench in the corner, and opened it. Outside, through the south-facing windows, the live oak stood in the playground, its modest canopy casting its modest circle of shade. The June sun was full and direct, and the sky was the deep, uncomplicated blue that South Texas offers in the mornings before the heat accumulates. The bell rang. 312 students moved through the hallways of a building that had not existed 11 months ago, and in a reading nook in a library named for a woman who had spent 31 years planting things that took 60 years to bloom. A 9-year-old girl turned a page. The drawer that opened an album by George Strait was released the following spring. The title track, written in 3 hours in a Nashville studio on a September morning, reached #1 on the Billboard Hot Country Songs chart in its 4th week. The liner notes contained a single dedication for Mrs. Patricia Ann Holloway. I heard you. I'm sorry it took so long to say so.